Tracy, congratulations on such, an incredibly artful but also very, very moving documentary. I know it's probably 6 years since the production of it. I think the genesis of the project is quite interesting, and how it actually came to be. Can you recall how you began working with Clio on this?
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for staying so late. It's sort of going back to the first film with Clio. Clio was living in Whitstable, was an artist filmmaker, very respected in the artist filmmaking world. Picked up a copy of Andrea of the play Rita, Sue and Bob 2, which was printed with another play called A State Affair, which is referenced in the film. And Clio had loved Rita, Sue and Bob 2 and Alan Clark's films, and loved this film. And when she saw the book printed, she was really interested in the play and the representation of the Buttershore estate in A State Affair, which is about 10 years after the Arbor was set. So she put in a submission to Art Angel, which is an arts organisation which supports artists, fabulous organisation, to explore the Buttershore estate and its representation in the media. And she went up to the estate, and for about 1.5 years she recorded audio from various people on the estate that were related to Andrea. And at that point, she didn't know about Lorraine until Michael Morris, the head of Art Angel, was speaking to Max Stafford Clark, and he sort of said, "Do you know about Andrea's daughter Lorraine and what is happening at the moment?" And the first time that Clio met Lorraine was in the hearing prior to the trial for Harris's death, and from that, Clio started writing to Lorraine and built up a relationship with Lorraine through letter writing. And it was at that point that she started to change the story in a way from the focus being on the sort of much broader Buttershore estate and its representation in the media to focus more on Andrea and Lorraine and that kind of personal story. I entered the picture when Clio had been recording for about 1.5 years and had 90 hours of audio, and came on board sort of kind of halfway through when she'd established a lot of the relationship, and she'd been up there for quite a long period, but it was at a point which was sort of where a decision sort of had to be made to sort of look at what had been collected and look at what story she wanted to tell, because I think there was about 4 or 5 films in there.
Absolutely, yeah. I know Clio was originally from the Bradford area. Was that a help in her getting the entire family on board, because there are a lot of Dunbars in the piece?
I think it helps, because I think that she's from Yorkshire, and I think that there is a certain part of being a native that kind of helps. But I think if you meet Clio, she's got a really special quality about her, and people, went onto this estate with a rucksack and a tape recorder, and she's about 6'2", and she just sits down with people, and there is a quality that they not just open up, but she has the quality where people will open up to her. But by the time I became involved, these people not only sort of respected her and understood what she was doing, but really took her to their hearts. She really she's very important to them. And I was speaking to Anne today, who's represented in the film, and there's just such warmth towards Clio.
Which is a great starting point.
A great starting point. And I think without that, kind of human factor. I just don't think she could have made this film.
The verbatim theatre aspect to the film, I mean, was that always going to be the way from day one, or was it something that happened more gradually as the story, especially Lorraine's story, began to unfold?
No, I think Clio would say that she wanted to use that technique because she went up with a voice recorder and like a Zoom voice recorder, and not carrying a little film kit. So she knew she wanted to use that technique, and because I think she'd used it in random acts, I don't think she would say she wasn't as nervous about that as staging the Arbor on the Arbor, which was the thing that she would say she was most nervous about. I was quite nervous about the verbatim technique. Not once I saw random acts, I totally got it, but I was just worried in terms of practicality, time scale of actors learning and actors' ability to be able to do it, because it's a tricky thing to do.
I mean, was it a long shoot?
17 days.
17 days, so the whole thing had to be completed on the Arbor in 17 days.
We actually filmed 10 of those days in London. We took over an old people's home in South Merton. I can't. Yeah. So that's when you see everyone's different living rooms, because that was sort of the cheapest way to do it. And then we went up to Buttershaw for the exterior shots.
In terms of the family themselves, we say Lorraine and Lisa, I mean, how did they feel about using this quite experimental technique to tell what is an incredibly raw and obviously very truthful story?
I think that it's very difficult, because I think when it's a very emotional story, and I think people are divided when there's children involved and children's lives involved, and it's really emotive, and it's difficult to what I suppose what you can hope for, the best that you can hope for, is that you tell it truthfully. And I think that ultimately they felt that, I think the way that she decided to do it was of interest, but I think ultimately they wanted the truth to be told, or their version. I think they all felt that at the end of it, that even though some of them are on different sides, and some people really do blame Lorraine and can't see that, we've got it in the film that Lisa thinks that Andrea was a wonderful mother and Lorraine doesn't. So we were navigating people who had very different memories of how people were to them, and how things played out. So it was about navigating that, but I think ultimately people felt that their voices were heard and that their version was put forward.
They literally are heard the whole way through.
Yeah.
You just mentioned telling the truth and having a truthful story. It's hinted at in the film that there was some animosity towards Andrea during her lifetime for portraying the estate in quite a negative fashion. Putting the Arbor on and kind of returning to the scene of the crimes so many years later, did that get any animosity from the current or the then current residents of the estate?
We didn't. I think Clio had done. Because Clio had gone in there for a year and a half and built people's trust and really wanted to take care of their side of the story. I think that people were very positive, and I think it's basically down to Clio and how she built relationships with people, and they could understand, and we were tried to sort of be clear about what we were trying to do and what the story we were trying to tell. So I think it was all down to her, really.
So her influence cast a very good approach for the locals in the area. I mean, they trusted her from the off.
I think so, but I think there are always going to be people who it might get their backs up, or who will go, well, why do you want to tell a story about that? Why don't you tell a story about this person? And at the end of the day, you can only choose kind of the story you want to tell and you're interested in. So.
We have a rolling mic, so we'll take any questions from the audience. Is anybody? There's a gentleman in the centre.
Thanks, it's a really great film. That's the third time I've actually seen this movie, and every time I see it, I look at it from multiple perspectives. As I see it, as I've seen it for the third time, as I looked at the film this time, it feels like a film that's as much about the multiple characters, but it's also about issues such as race. Was that your intention, or was that something that span off as you made the film?
That it's about
race, yeah.
Well, I think it for Lorraine, that's a really important part. She sees that, how she was treated. I think, that's an important part of her story, how she feels she was treated. And that was because of, that she wasn't like her brothers and sisters, that she was set apart, and that, her father was Pakistani. So I think what's highlighted in the film is that this was an issue for her. But I don't think it's whether you see that as the overriding theme in the film. I suppose I think people will take different things. For me, it's a mother and daughter story primarily, but I think different people will maybe. I think that's one of the things about Clio's films. They're very layered, and there's quite a lot of themes running through them, and I think you can, depending on who you are and your take on it, I think you can maybe assess it slightly differently.
Every time I've seen the film, I've taken something different from it. So it's I just feel it's a really good production. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Were Lorraine and Lisa on good terms during the making of the film?
It's quite a difficult one because I'm siblings. I think are just fascinating and very complicated, and I'm not trying to evade your question. I think they have a difficult relationship, and I think they have. I think they don't, like any siblings, they don't always get on. They don't see eye to eye, and I think that parts of the film were difficult. I think for Lisa to, for the past history and I think possibly the guilt over maybe what happened to Harris and people feeling kind of different levels of responsibility for that, and I think it's a very complicated relationship. So yeah.
Good answer. I think we have a question over there.
Was there much debate about shifting it from the initial premise that was more of like a social history to where there was like definite finger pointing to see like the decreasing of the community and stuff like that, to something a bit more subjective, which is like the family history and stuff like that?
Oh gosh. I don't know whether I'm going to answer your question very well. I think that because I think when you're developing it as you go along, I think you're especially with something when Clio had spoken to so many people, and it was such a broad canvas, and she started refining it. I think that there was a point where it became about that relationship dynamic between mother and daughter, and I think that became the driver in the narrative, and whether maybe it could have been more issue driven. I mean, I'm not sure if that's your question. Am I answering it?
It is kind of, because I kind of feel like the more social history aspect would have been, I don't know, personally more interesting, because I like the personal side of it, where it ended up being, I kind of feel like the most coming from a kind of estates quite similar, the only noteworthy part of it was that the mother was famous. There's loads of stories like that, but the story of like how an estate can turn from a community to where everyone's a complete stranger, I think is quite pertinent, especially when the London riots happened, and it'd be like, oh, how can these people not really care about their community, because there is none. And it's quite interesting to see the decreasingness of how that happened, maybe. I don't know.
Gosh, I'm just don't feel qualified to answer you at all. But when I've been up on Brafferton Arbor, the thing that I get there is a sense of community, and I went there to work on this film, and it's very, very strong. And it's not easy. It was no easy job for Clio to just walk in there and kind of, insert herself into people's lives, because they're kind of, there's a very strong sense of their loyalty to that place and that area, and then the people within it who are their neighbours. So I don't know if I can answer you. I know in the film that the estate was kind of decimated by heroin, and I think that was a particular period. And when I visited there, that wasn't really, the estate was no longer at the mercy of what it had been in, that period. So I can't really comment on about the London riots and why. That, I mean,
it's very similar how it's very similar in how the community can break down and how they don't have any connection to it, especially in the state affair, where Lorraine actually says that. She says like this, she sees it as a continuing, like a third part of a trilogy, to say that that's how it's the death of a community, basically.
But that was through heroin, though. She says that if they would be they would be smack heads.
Yeah, but I think she does also go on to say that she sees as a sequel to that, where it's just completely like it's over, like that's the. Yeah, and I kind of saw parallels with that. Not like, yeah. That's just me, anyway.
Well, maybe, but just from that estate, I can still, there is still very much a sense of community there that has survived that. And some of those same families are living there, and Pamela lived there up until a couple of years ago, Pamela Dunbar. So.
You went back there again for the Selfish Giant. The next film with
yes, we did, yeah, but we were sort of banned by the council for filming there. Yeah. So it wasn't, the community were fine with us being there, but the authorities weren't so happy.
I think there's a gentleman who's been trying to have his question asked over there on the.
Yeah, hi. So thank you for coming tonight. I was just going to ask you, could you tell us a little bit about the casting? You said that she'd been filming for a year and a half, and had a few storylines. Did she get her first choice in cast? And yeah, could you speak just a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So she'd been recording. And not filming, it was just audio. So when Casting, okay. It starts with an amazing casting director called Amy Hubbard, who basically is a bit of a genius. And did we have our first choice? Well, I think there's a you can have sort of wish lists of cast, and it can kind of you can for some reasons financially you need to go for kind of big names and things like that, but our film we didn't need to cast certain level, so we were open to sort of cast, you know, who Amy thought would just be perfect for the roles, and who Clio thought would be perfect for the roles. So I don't know if we had a specific list of people. How it works usually is that with Amy is that she will draw up a kind of list of people that she think would be really great, and then Clio would look through it, and then we would get in a room with people. When Manjinder came in, who plays Lorraine, she was, so how many months pregnant was she? She was I don't know how many months pregnant she was, but probably about 4 or yeah, and she read, they could choose the passage they wanted to read, and she chose the kind of one of the most sort of distressing full-on passages that she could have read. I think it's Lorraine describing how she was beaten up by a kitten, and that I remember being kind of really, and the lip syncing was flawless, because they'd been given, we had to give people audio discs, so they could choose between about 5 passages, and so she chose this kind of quite violent one. So the audition was unusual, because usually you wouldn't have to ask people to do a specific technique, and I have to say, some people took to it like a duck to water, and other people were a bit more not so easy with this. Some people saw it as just like, oh my god, this is so great, I can't wait for the challenge, and that was probably about 90%. And then some people were just a bit wary and found it a bit more tricky as a technique. With Natalie Gavin, who plays Andrea, we cast up on Buttershaw, and she lives on Buttershaw, and she walked in, and she did an amazing audition, and you know, it was just, she's kind of perfect. And my brain is really clicking here because it's quite a long time ago. I'm trying to remember if there's any more interesting or pertinent things, but I think because Clio could cast people who she felt were really right for the roles, and Amy allowed her, provided those kind of really good shortlists of people who she thought would be great. I mean, Monica Dolan, I hadn't heard about, who plays Anne. I hadn't really heard about Monica Dolan, and since then she's kind of in every good television thing that's on. She's absolutely amazing, and Amy kind of was like, I think Monica would be great at this, and there we go, like, bloody brilliant, you know, of course, she's amazing, you know. So I think part of it's the having a really good casting director. Oh, I can say something else. George Costigan, who plays Jim, is Bob in Rita Sue and Bob 2. It's the same actor. So there were a bit of, you know, a bit of that.
So this will be the very last question.
Okay, thank you.
No pressure.
Okay, lady sitting next to me is very patiently been waiting, so I'll try and be quick. Thank you very much for your work on the film. A couple of questions. One is, and this key one for me, I suppose, is editorially, how did the relationship work with Lorraine and her siblings? For example, did they sign off on the structure of what was going to be used from the early recordings, and was that all gone through and then you moved into the verbatim theatre phase, or were they more involved than that through the process? And if they'd objected to something or felt, oh, that's too strong, or that might compromise something, how did that work?
they didn't have any editorial. They didn't have an editorial control. But what we did do was, we showed the film to all of them before we delivered it to the financiers to allow them to be able to say, I'm not happy with this. I'm not, to allow them to voice any concerns, and none of them did.
And if any had, would you, I guess it depend on the objection, but did you feel there was room for manoeuvre to accommodate something like that? You would listen to, obviously you got to listen and see what the concern is, and it's difficult if I suppose you want to sort of tell the story, and I think if you edit, if for instance Lorraine had said, I don't want Lisa's comments about how she remembers it because that undermines what I'm saying and that can't be in the film, well then we wouldn't feel that was fair to Lisa. So we're trying to, you're trying to sort of balance out so that everybody has a chance to put their view across, and I think that's what we got at the end of the film. There were people who stood back and said, I can't ever, I can't ever agree with how Lorraine perhaps behaved, but we feel that our voice was heard as the sort of counterpoint, so we feel that's fair enough. And Lorraine didn't ask to withdraw any of her comments or any of the details that...
No.
Okay, thank you.
No, she said it was tough, but it was fair. When she watched it, she said it's tough, but it's fair.
This will have to be very quick, this question.
Okay, yeah. It was beautifully filmed, and for me it's just a classic case of an innocent child, when an innocent child is affected by family traumas and things, and that is when it becomes press. And so I thought the film was great in reflecting that and showing all the views and all the sides of the story, because everyone has a story and everyone wants to pass the buck when there's an innocent child affected. So I think this film highlights that. My question is, how is Lorraine today?
Well, I spoke to Anne today, and I know that Clio had spoke to Lorraine not that long ago, and Lorraine is doing well. She's fine. She's not living in the region anymore. She lives in another city in the UK. She has a partner, and I think she's doing okay. And that's
amazing after what she's been through.
Yeah, it's she's sort of she's an incredibly resilient woman, and she has she has been through a lot, and it's very hard to any type of addiction, and particularly with heroin addiction, it's very, very hard to turn your life around. It's extremely difficult, and and that's with the best support. So she is she's doing well.
I think that's a very good positivity for us to finish up the Q&A. So, Tracy O'Riordan, thank you very much for joining us.